guys, welcome back to Room 237, and I know I haven't been making a lot of videos lately. I've been so caught up in a lot of different things going on. Haven't had much time, but I'm desperately trying to make more time for videos. I know we're well into November, and I don't really have anything planned, except maybe getting to some more anthologies that I couldn't get to in October. I've been wanting to go back to silent films. There's a bunch of silent films I'd love to get to. I love silent films. I want to do some of those, and I got a couple Batman books that I want to do. Pretty much kill November so that when December comes, I can do Ho Ho Horror 2020, and then I'll figure that out. So, and I don't think a lot of people are really interested in the anthologies. I know there's at least one person that's been downvoting every video, which I do want to say, if you're going to downvote a video, could you at least comment saying why you don't like it? Otherwise, you're just trolling. But anyway, so yeah, pretty much look for silent films and some anthologies that I didn't get to for October. At least till we get into the holiday-themed month of December. So, here is an anthology from 1977. It is The Uncanny with Peter Cushing. Now, even though it is produced by Milton Subotsky, this is not an Amicus film. This came out after Amicus stopped doing their anthologies. It's one of two films that, one of two films that Milton Subotsky tried to do after Amicus. There was this and The Monster Club, which Cushing came in for this, not that one. And there's another film called Tales That Witness Madness that isn't produced by him or Amicus, but these two often get lumped in with Amicus films because they're British, they're anthologies, they have similar casts. Like this also has Donald Pleasance, Samantha Eggar, who of course would go on a couple years later to work with Cronenberg in The Brood, John Vernon, Alexandra Stewart. It was directed by Dennis Hero, who also did Naked Massacre. And cinematography was done by Harry Waxman, who prior to this did The Wicker Man. Now, The Uncanny, it's a very Edgar Allan Poe type anthology. It's 3 stories about evil cats, and the framework is Peter Cushing plays, what's his character's name? Wilbur Gray, who's a writer, and he visits this publisher named Frank Richards, who's played by Ray Milland, who I know I've seen he was in Dial M for Murder by Hitchcock. I think he was in other Amicus films as well. Almost sure. Let's see. His filmography goes all the way back to the 20s. Wow. Pajama Girl Case, which is a giallo. Last Tycoon with Robert De Niro, which is a film I've always wanted to see. Terror in the Wax Museum, House in Nightmare Park, Frogs. I've heard of Frogs. I think I've seen parts of it, actually. Premature Burial by Roger Corman. That was the other film I've seen him in. Alright, so, and basically, Cushing has kind of devoted his life to collecting all this real-life research about how cats are sort of this superior being who are evil, and exploit and kill humans. And of course, the publisher doesn't buy this at all. He's familiar with all three cases that he presents to him, and he just doesn't see how cats are the ones responsible. And so we get three stories, and unlike the other, well, not other Amicus, but unlike Amicus films, where that primarily British, this was a mixed production between the Rank organization, which is based in England or the UK, and Cinevideo, which is based in Canada. So then it was distributed by Rank Films and Astral Films, which Astral Films is from Canada. So the story settings go back and forth between Canadian settings and English. So he's got this big satchel with all his research, and he presents these stories to him. Of course, it takes place in 1977. But the first story, we go to 1912 London, where there's this woman named Miss Malkin, who was played by Joan Greenwood, who I think that's a pretty big name. Man in the White Suit, Portraits of Mae Ernest, Tom Jones. I think she's a pretty big actress. She's this elderly invalid woman, or maybe not invalid, but she has this very big mansion, and she's with her lawyer. She's rewriting her will to give everything to her big collection of cats. And her maid is Janet, who's also sort of dating her nephew. She catches on to this, and she steals the will, presents it to her nephew, and they decide to get rid of her. She knows that Janet knows that she keeps a copy of this will in her safe, which she saw the lawyer put away. So she knows where the safe is. And where she sneaks in to get it from the safe, she wakes up, she goes to smother her with a pillow, and then she is attacked by her cats. And I will say, some of these stories, I mean, this one is probably the silliest of the three, but they are all equally entertaining in their own way. She does get away to the kitchen, locks the door, and of course she's all cut up. And the cats are all outside the door. They want to kill her. Because it shows that they are aware and, you know, I was going to say conscious, but obviously they are, as to what's going on. And it shows that time is going by for days. I mean, she's getting hungrier, she's getting thirstier. She has a little bit of bread, but not much. At one point, she even licks the blood off her hand. It kind of looks like a cat. At one point, she even puts wet cat food on a piece of bread and eats that, even though she doesn't want to. I'm guessing for some sort of moisture. So you start thinking, oh, maybe she's going to go crazy or think she's a cat, possibly turn into a cat. It doesn't go that supernatural. At least not this story. And eventually she does leave the kitchen, and she sees that the woman has been eaten by all the cats. And then she is attacked. And I will say the editing does work for this. I mean, you know, I'm sure in the 70s people were a lot more rough with animals, but, you know, and it doesn't look a lot like stuffed animals. I mean, we get a couple shots of cats, jumping off furniture or off like the loft or whatever. And you might get like a shot of like a stuffed animal on her shoulder very quickly. But it does take itself fairly seriously. And then of course she's killed. She's killed by the cats and eaten. And then, eventually authorities and the nephew come by, find the bodies. And I do like the effects of, the eaten bodies. It doesn't look overly fake or silly because this does have, obviously, a smaller budget than earlier Amicus films. Because I do believe these films were more of a desperate attempt to keep this anthology thing going by Subotsky. Apparently, Peter Cushing was the third choice to play the author. I don't know who the first two were. Oh, yeah, I'll save that for after. And of course, when it cuts back to Cushing and the publisher's always like, well, it's all kinds of explanations as to how that could have happened. So then it goes to the next story. And I'll say the next story was probably the most interesting because it did remind me of something else. This is in 1975 Quebec. There's this orphan named Lucy who goes to live with her aunt and uncle, and her young cousin, who's a little bit older and bigger. Her parents have died in a plane crash. And Lucy brings the only thing she has left, which is this black cat named Wellington. And so her older cousin is a girl named Angela. And this girl reminded me of Alice from Alice, Sweet Alice. She is just a rotten child, just a mean, rotten child. Because the aunt already doesn't like the cat Wellington. And so Angela really bullies Lucy, saying, I'm big, you're small, I can do whatever I want. There's a part where they're painting, and Angela wants to play with Wellington, but the cat keeps running away. She knocks over her own thing of paint, but blames it on the cat. So the aunt gets mad at the cat. At one point, Angela picks up this big plane. It's like, I built this with my daddy. Isn't that cool? And she even goes over to Lucy, who, swoops the plane down, almost on top of her. It's like, but you don't have a daddy, you don't have a mommy, you have nothing. And just keeps trying to bully her and the cat just because she can. And also the aunt finds these books of black magic and the books on the occult. Keeps trying to get rid of them. And at first I was like, okay, where's this going to go? I could tell this is going to go in a different direction than the first story. And at first I was thinking maybe the cat, the spirit of her cat is her mother or something. It didn't go there. There's one part where Aunt Angela's inside. Lucy and the cat are outside. Her dad is outside. And he runs up to her, he picks her up, and they're playing, they're laughing, and she just gets this look on her face, just angry and jealous. So she takes this remote control plane and is chasing Lucy with it, flying it down so she has to duck. She's getting in the mud. The remote control does lose control and almost crashes into her and hits the house. So when she's inside, and the aunt is kind of a bitchy character because, she has tears, she looks upset and scared, covered in mud. She's like, what on earth happened to you? And Angela runs down and is like, oh, she was out rolling around in the mud. She fell in the mud because she was chasing the cat. And she tries to say it's not true. Angela interrupts her. Aunt doesn't let her finish. Just go upstairs and change. And that's when, Angela's like, wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for the cat. So the aunt looks at her husband and is like, we got to get rid of the cat. The cat's a big problem. And he even says, I don't like the extra work, this cat hair and everything. So she suggests he take it to a place that will put it down painfully and quietly and quickly. He takes the cat, which of course Angela rubs in Lucy's face. Even says taking him to the butcher. And somehow the cat escapes and comes back home. It doesn't show it, which I thought was fine. I mean, with stories like this, we don't really need it. Also, the aunt has burnt her black magic books. So now, the uncle's doing something. The aunt is out. Lucy sees that Wellington has come home. And there's one more book of black magic left. So she takes these candles, draws a pentagram. That's when Angela comes in. And of course, she's trying to be a little bitch. And she says, they trick her because, I do like the shot where she's like, what's all this chalk and candles? You're going to be in trouble. You better clean it before she gets home. And Lucy's like, oh, well, don't say anything and don't step in the circle. It could be dangerous. Which, of course, she gets that look like on Alice, Sweet Alice. Where the one guy tells her to stop doing something. She just keeps doing it. That was a rotten child, too. But I have reviewed Alice, Sweet Alice. Which, of course, she just kind of hikes up her nightdress and just steps right in the pentagram. I like the look that Lucy gives Wellington. Because it's like, stupid girl. We tricked her. And she starts doing this incantation, and she's held within this pentagram. And she does, the incantation makes her shrink very, very, very tiny. And, I mean, you can tell it's like a green screen. It is optical effects, which even for 1977, for its low budget, I thought it looked fine. I mean, there's a lot of green screen at the end of this story. Like, we see Angela down here, then we see like a big Lucy kind of getting down to her level, and it's like, you're not a big girl anymore. You're small, like a mouse. And then, of course, Wellington starts terrorizing her like a mouse. Which, I will say the optical effects in the green screen does look more effective. Then when it shows the cat going to, like, paw her, and you can tell it's like this big stuffed cat paw. I will say that's the weakest effect. But like she runs under a chair, which one I do like the scale of everything. Like she bumps into the candlestick and wax falls. See a giant candle. The grout of the tiles. I like the scale of everything. She runs under a chair that has sort of the tassel-y stuff around it. And so we see the green screen of giant Lucy, giant Wellington looking under at her. Giant mouse trap that she has to get around. And at first I was thinking, okay, what if she is gonna somehow transfer the soul of the cat and Angela, swap each other? So that way, I don't know how that would work, because I was still thinking, what if Wellington is the soul of her mother? Because she even says that the black magic books were her mother's. That was kind of why I was thinking that. But I was thinking, well, if it is just a cat, how are you gonna get like a cat and a girl like sort of mentally? And then that way, when the aunt comes home, sees the cat, wants to get rid of it, even though it is the soul of her daughter in it. I thought that would have been interesting, but it doesn't really go there. The aunt comes home, and she just steps on Angela, crushes and kills her. Which, I mean, obviously, you can tell it's like a little doll that she's stepping on with the 70s sort of European, thick, vibrant red blood. Which the mother comes in, asks what all this stuff is, thinks the red is paint, and goes to clean it. And then we see Cushing and the publisher together, and again, he says, well, yes, Angela did disappear, but I believe she can be found. So even the parents didn't know that it was her that was crushed. So then we come to the last story, which I'll say probably was the weakest, which is kind of surprising, because this is the story with both Donna Pleasance and Samantha Eggar. Wow, I can't talk today. And this takes place in 1936 Hollywood. And John Vernon plays the director, who of course he was like the dean in Animal House, which he was definitely more threatening and intimidating in Animal House than in this. But was he in horror films? I want to say he was. He was in a number of films with Clint Eastwood. Airplane 2. He was the bad guy in Ernest Goes to Camp. He was in Killer Clowns from Outer Space. Okay. But anyway. So they're doing like this sort of witch trial, I guess, kind of movie. But Donna Pleasance plays this guy, Valentine Diath. I think was how they pronounce it. But his wife is an actress in the film with him, who's supposed to be like this tortured woman in the scene, and he's supposed to have this pendulum come down, but he replaces the fake blade in the pendulum with a real one. It kills her. They rule it as an accident. And he did that so that his young mistress, played by Samantha Eggar, could have that lead role. But then it is the wife's cat that gets revenge on the two of them, and John Vernon plays the director. Like they're doing this one scene where I guess the props are real. He's teaching Samantha Eggar kind of how to do like this really real scream when she's supposed to be put in this room, this thing with the door has nails. So they're sort of rehearsing together, and he's supposed to be shutting the door slowly, but the cat jumps in the way, so he like jumps out of the way, and the thing's on like a spool or like a crank, and it just goes nuts, slams on her, kills her. He knows it was the cat, so he's chasing the cat around with his axe. Off screen, we hear cat, and cat noises with Donald Pleasance screaming. And the director comes in and, sees him sitting at his makeup table. He's talking to him, not answering. He's like, "Cat got your tongue?" And when he goes and he looks at the reflection, he sees he's dead, mouth open with blood. Looks over at the cat and is chewing on what looks like a tongue. So yes, he does. Oh, I would say it was the less interesting, but Donald Pleasance was great, as always. It looked kind of weird because he had like a full head of like orange hair. It was the year before Halloween. But Donald Pleasance, a lot like Cushing and Lee and Price and Karloff, always brings total class and pure devotion to his role, no matter how small. I will say this story was better than the one in From Beyond the Grave, which was the Amicus film that I also reviewed that had Donald Pleasance. And so then we get the epilogue where Cushing is telling the guy, no, cats have been doing this for centuries. I have the proof. I'll leave my life's research with you. Guard it. I have to leave. It's dark. Cats are out. He's walking home and he's attacked by a bunch of cats. The publisher's reading this thing and he has a white Persian cat and he kind of like looks up like he's in a trance. So we keep getting a shot of his Persian cat with like the flames of the fireplace kind of superimposed over him, as if he's being like possessed by his own cat to burn the research, which he does. Then he gives his cat some milk. Last shot is Cushing dead on the ground with the cat running by. And it opens with a quote by Ted Hughes. Ted Hughes, quote, He leaps and lightly walks upon sleep, his mind on the moon. Nightly over the round world of men, over the roofs of his eyes and outcry. Of course, Ted Hughes was a poet and children's author. And then it ends with a quote by Giles Lytton Strachey, who was sort of a Victorian era writer, critic, who put a lot of psychology and humor in his writings. Ends with him saying, and gaze into your gazing eyes and wonder in a demi-dream what mystery it is that lies behind those slits and glare and gleam. And of course that's over the still shot of Cushing that is dead. And I will say the score I liked. The score was done by Wilfred Josephs, which, I mean, parts of it has just like that kind of building horror music. But, see what else he's done. I guess not much that I'm familiar with. Okay. Ghosts of Motley Hall. The Prisoner. Which I did like the opening credits. It's like this purple and pinks mixed with like paintings of cats, which you'll see in the thumbnail when I put up the original poster. So I thought that was interesting. This release is from Severin Films. They always do great releases. Although it only comes with the only feature is an interview with Susan Penhaligon. Wow, I couldn't say that. Who was I actually missed who she was in this film. She's not in this film, but anyway. Oh, and the young girl Lucy is actually Charles Bronson's daughter. Not the actor, not the prisoner. But I can say this was actually better than probably half of the Amicus films. I mean, not Asylum or Torture Garden or The House That Dripped Blood. Maybe not even Crypt or Vault. It was definitely better than From Beyond the Grave. Maybe better than Dr. Terror's House of Horrors. Better than half the stories in Dr. Terror's House of Horrors. And yeah, it does have a smaller budget. That is obvious. But, you know, the whole cast does a great job. I mean, Cushing, for his very small role, very dedicated. He's very, very well does he play this timid, on edge, freaked out author. Donald Pleasance was great. And even though Donald Pleasance's story was probably the least interesting, it was still good to see him and Samantha Eggar in it, at least. I'd probably say the second story was probably the most interesting, because it's going to involve these two girls, the orphan and the spoiled brat. But I did enjoy this film. It also had a very Edgar Allan Poe feel, if not the kinds of stories he did, but someone who's inspired by Poe. Like, that's what it felt like. It was actually, the screenplay was written by Michael Perry, where most Amicus films were done by Robert Bloch. But the sort of Poe evil cat stories, it went well with the budget, the cinematography, the acting. It felt like it really took its time trying to tell 3 better told stories than 5 hit or miss stories. But for the last anthology, I think with Cushing and sort of post Amicus, Milton Subotsky Productions, or one of his last in post Amicus, I actually thought it was pretty decent. Very simple stories with a smaller budget, but I thought they were entertaining and interesting. But yeah, Uncanny 1977, I actually enjoyed it. Thank you for watching.